True. Okay, folks, today, very first interview for Santa Barbara International Film Festival. Gareth Kelly is here with his film, Keep the Funk. So I'm super, super excited to talk about lots of things. First off, I want to start off with the fact that I noticed for the very first time in 18 years, you went back to your home country of the UK. So I have to ask, what took you 18 years?
Ah, you missed the key word there, and thanks for having me, Cindy. I'm really stoked to be
Sure.
here. It's the first time in 18 years I've been back to the UK for Christmas.
Ah, thank
So
you.
I've been back in.
Okay.
I was actually there in spring and summer and stuff, but first time in Christmas, and that was, my wife had never been to the UK for Christmas. My dad is, getting up there in age
Yeah.
now, and I just, Christmas in California, as nice as it is, it's not as traditional as I feel Christmas is, and so I wanted to be cold and have British TV and British food and traditional Christmas dinner, and so that's the reason we went.
Ah, gotcha. Now, besides the delightful accent and the fact that I know the BAFTAs come from UK, I know very little about your home country. So I want to ask, I always like to find out from an arts and creative perspective, is it a rich community for filmmaking and writing and creating there?
Absolutely. Every time we go to the UK, my wife always notices, and not just when we go, but we watch a lot of British shows and stuff and films, and she always points out how revered the arts seem to be in the UK and UK culture, and how much we care about the arts and film and drama and what have you. And as part of my degree, I did a full minor in drama, so I'm technically a classically trained thespian. I haven't really used it at all, but yes, and there's been this debate in Hollywood for a long time about, a lot of the leading men and women for that matter in Hollywood are often British. And people sort of Americans were like, well, why is there all these British people? But I think that it's ingrained in us from a young age that, the arts is very, very important. And my famous quote that I like to use about this is attributed to Winston Churchill. I'm not sure how true it is, but it works. And so during World War II, Winston Churchill, someone suggested to him that the British government cut funding for the arts. And Winston Churchill turned around and said, "Then what are we fighting for?" And I think that really sums up how the British feel about the arts. Like, what's the point of life without art, right?
Yeah.
And so I think the British really cling on to that, and it's encouraged for people to draw, to read, to paint. And of course, we're lucky in that, I grew up, they push Shakespeare down our throats from a young age, as well as telling us about Chaucer, who Shakespeare actually got a lot of his ideas from. And then, where I'm from in particular in the UK is where Wordsworth is from. And then we've got Keats and the classics. And so, I mean, we're just surrounded by hundreds and hundreds of years of these incredible, writers and painters and actors. And then we have Rada and Laurence Olivier, and it goes on and on and on. So I think it's a huge part of British culture.
You betcha. So now where you are at now, I know that this could possibly happen in the near future. If one person were to hand you an Oscar versus winning the BAFTAs, which would be more important to you? Because you are from the UK, but now here you are.
That's a really interesting question. I kind of like that question.
Mm-hmm.
My heart says the BAFTA, but
Yes.
my head says the Oscar because I think as beautiful and as important as incredible as winning a BAFTA would be, Oscar's top of the tree,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it just is on a global level. If you win an Oscar, you are that's it. That's it. You can't go anywhere from there, right? Up. Don't get me wrong, love the BAFTAs and I would happily take a BAFTA, but I think Oscar is absolutely top of the tree for right reasons, and so I'd probably take the Oscar.
I knew it. I knew that was going to be the case. Okay. Now, you and I have some similarities. First off, I know that you were working with the Nature Track Film Festival for about 2.5 years or so. So, give us a background on that. And moreover, how did that help you become a better filmmaker?
Um, yeah, as a active filmmaker on the film festival circuit, I've been to many film festivals as a filmmaker, and I think that running Nature Track just allowed me to focus on some things that I think are important to film festivals, specifically as it relates to the experience of filmmakers. Like there would be no film festivals without filmmakers and without films.
Absolutely.
And
Yep.
so I think that's a critical part of any film festival. And part of that for me is I was talking to somebody last night about this at the Santa Barbara happy hour. Filmmaking, as you probably know, it's a really, really weird job. And a lot of your friends that have quote unquote regular jobs, they don't really understand what they do. And when you're chatting with them, they don't get it. And it's really hard to explain to them what you do, especially if you're like a producer, because it's just this vague thing that people don't really understand. You go
Hmm.
to a film festival and it's filled with filmmakers, and it's like finding your people. And you just suddenly then are able to talk about these weird things that only filmmakers really understand, and these odd and unusual experiences that you have. And that's one of my favorite things about going to film festivals is meeting other filmmakers and being able to like nerd out and geek out about the process of making films because it is so weird. And so I don't know if running Nature Tap made me a better filmmaker per se, but it made me appreciate festivals differently, and it made me want to, make sure that our festival really the did right by filmmakers and gave them the best experience that they could possibly have.
You betcha. We all strive to do that. Some years easier than others, so we'll have to see. One of the other things we were just talking about off camera, of course, was your time as a freelance journalist with BBC. So there's a lot of us out there, myself included, who are always looking at the next step, the next level, that sort of good stuff. Is BBC achievable? And going back and looking at it, especially now where you're at, because you're still on the media side of things, would you entertain going back?
Yeah, I mean, the media is such a tricky landscape at the moment, right? It's actually very similar to film in the sense of like, if you think of like BBC, CNN, the real top level, Washington Post or what have you, they're almost like the $200 million Marvel movies, right?
Yeah.
And then there's the like super, super tiny indie side of things, like the local newspapers, the small podcasts and what have you, which are really important, but it's difficult to sustain a living and a career out of at that level just from a financial point of view. And there's this missing middle, as they call it, right? Both in film and in journalism a little bit. It's how do like I don't spend as much time on the journalism side of my career primarily because there's not really the money in it to sustain myself.
Yeah.
Now, we can talk about there isn't really the money in the film side either. That's a separate thing. But, um, it's just as important. But we're in a tricky landscape for the media right now. And, local newspapers are falling by the wayside, and the BBC in many ways is incredibly unique. And whenever I'm back in the UK, people are critical of the BBC and they're critical of how it's funding. And I'm like, it is an absolute gem that needs to be protected at all costs. And perfect example, CNN recently started a paywall on nearly every single story on their website,
Yeah.
which irks me. Don't get me wrong, I recognize that news has to be paid for, but they're a big national multinational conglomerate, right? But
Hmm.
nearly every single story that CNN has on their website, the exact same story, oftentimes written better, is available for free on BBC's website. And so I always encourage people, especially Americans in this age of fake news and what have you, is the BBC is trust doesn't always get everything right, but it can absolutely be trusted. Go there first and look at stories there, or go there second after you've seen an American report on a story, and then go and see if their reporting is similar. The absolute gem to be protected. I'll fight that to the death with anyone.
Nice. Now, I notice you too, this is so funny. You wrote for the Santa Barbara Independent. One of the things that you specifically posted on was doing gift guides. And how ironic, I run a magazine and I produce a gift guide on a monthly basis and holidays and such. So, good question. For you personally, what makes for a good product gift guide? What do you look for?
Yeah, I've been really lucky actually with the Independent. I still write for the Independent, and
Mhm.
I've this was my fourth or fifth gift guide, I think now, the holiday gift guide. And for me, and a lot of us, I really try and focus on the local companies. Um,
Yep.
I could easily write a gift guide where it's like go on Amazon and pick this product or go to apple.com and pick these headphones. But what does that really do for anyone? And so there's some amazing local stores and products and businesses, and I really, really try and focus on those because I think that's important. You know, we all try and shop local as best we can, but without the local trade, there would be, very little going around really. And a good example, I think, and I discovered it this year and I included it in the gift guide. There is a tiny, tiny hole in the wall bookstore in Goleta of used books. And they'll take books on consignment and they'll buy you books and what have you. And you go in there and it's like something out of a Harry Potter movie. And it's just books everywhere, just from floor to ceiling about every possible subject. And, I'm a huge lover of books and I don't read as many as I want, mainly through time. But like, especially as a kid, I was very lucky. I read a lot of books. And so, like, those bookstores are so critical, I think, for artists in particular and creatives. Like,
Yeah.
go in there and lose yourself, sit on the floor, it's all dusty, pick a book up and read it. And so, I wanted to make sure that that bookstore got in the gift guide.
Yep, me too. I'm a big proponent of all the people that don't ever get seen. I want them to get seen, especially people that can't afford promotion, aren't
Yeah.
getting enough attention. The media just doesn't do the little guys. So I thought that was so neat that you had something like that, which is awesome. And speaking of books, you got to talk to me about your book, 100 Things to Do in San Luis. I can't even pronounce it.
San
How do you
Luis
pronounce?
Obispo.
Thank you so much before you die. So, every author at some point in time, I think, has at least one book in them. That's my personal feeling. So, tell us a bit about the book. And then, second of all, tell me about whether there's going to be a second book about Santa Barbara now.
Well, unfortunately, it's a series of books around the country from different cities, and the Santa Barbara one was already done, and I
Ah,
actually know the author. Um, and so that was as I was going through my big career shift from construction worker to
yeah.
creative, and moved to Florida and what have you. And I wrote it while I was in Florida, actually, a lot of it. But I used to write a lifestyle column in San Luis Obispo for the local newspaper, and so I had a lot of connections in that world anyway, and a lot of places I've been and what have you. So it was a relatively simple process. That book was interesting in that it was very formulaic in the sense of the publisher um, had gone through this process around the country in many different cities in the US before. And so they were able to give me a really good roadmap to follow and how to put it together and what have you. So
Mhm.
yeah, it was fun and I'm really proud of it. I in terms of a sequel, I think I'm focused on my film career more so than
Of
anything
course.
these days. I would and screenwriting in particular, but I'm sure another book might bubble up. I'm there's oh man, his name's gonna escape me and I it's gonna annoy me. There's a very, very famous American author, what's his name? And he did kind of the opposite of me in that he is from Iowa and he moved to the UK. Notes from a Small Island is the book, and I can't remember. Bill Bryson. Bill Bryson,
Okay.
very famous American author, and he moved to the UK and he worked as a journalist and he lived in the UK for over 20 years and he wrote about the UK from his perspective as an American. And I've always felt that the opposite is the obvious book for me to write. A British person, I've now been here over 20 years and I'm like, it could be notes from a big country, right? But I'd love to do that book as like my observations of America from a British perspective because things are different.
I'm sure that they probably are. Oh my gosh. On the personal side of things, to those of you that do not know Gareth, this is what I can tell you. I have a list of 6 or 7 things that I know he adores. Hamburgers is one, cats is another. Sailing is another. His beautiful wife, who he has had for the last 8 years, chasing his dreams, of course. And we can't forget to state the obvious. He loves documentary film work. So I want to ask you a question relative to your wife. I used to work with my partner, and I can tell you that as much as I'd love to say it's Shangri-La 24/7, no. But I'm not sure. Do you work with your partner? And second of all, it's been often said that our partners, our personal partners, play such a big role in our professional life. Is that true for you as well?
Yeah, I mean it's nuanced. We don't work specifically together. However, she's a huge advocate for me, and she's an incredible sounding board. She's finishing up a PhD, and so she's very smart and has traveled a lot, and so we definitely align ideologically, and she's definitely she wasn't really much of a TV and film watcher until she met me, and now she is, and it's funny the things she now spots, and we as we're watching stuff, you know, she critiques things now as a filmmaker would, which I think is pretty funny. But yeah, she supports me, and she's great to bounce ideas off, and I respect her opinion. We don't actually work together. It's
Uh-huh.
not to say we won't ever one day. I think she'd actually be pretty good as a producer, but she's got her own career path that she's working on right now, and so we'll see what happens.
You betcha. The other thing he didn't mention, by the way, she's radiant. Yeah, that's right. All these filmmakers have these beautiful women that they're married to. It's like, God, she just looks like she could be an actress.
Yeah.
Um, the other important thing that I see you do regularly on and off social media is a constant and persistent message of chasing your dreams all the time. So let's say somebody watches this and they're a regular 9 to 5 kind of guy, driving a truck, doing whatever have you, and they have this burning passion inside of them, but they're terrified or truly just confused as to how to get into something. What would you advise for them, even if they're 55, 60 or older?
That's a really good question, and I think I'm the epitome of that. I did that. I was the 9 to 5 guy. I was literally a concrete truck driver for 10 years. And I started off with a in life, I'd always wanted to work in film and in Hollywood and be involved in the media. I worked in local radio as a teenager. I then went to college and I did film and television and drama, and that was what I wanted to do. And then I went traveling the world for a little bit, and I sort of by accident ended up in construction, and then I bought this concrete business and I was driving a concrete truck, and then sort of in my early 30s I just woke up and I realized I was miserable and I wasn't happy. And I thought to myself, if I don't go for what I'd always dreamed about, I will regret it for the rest of my life. And I'll probably be miserable for the rest of my life. And I didn't want to be miserable. And also, frankly, when you're miserable, you're typically a bit of an asshole to people around you, right? And so I made just a conscious decision. And I'm from a little village in England, and I'd always wanted to work in Hollywood. And at the time, I was living in San Luis Obispo, and it was like a light bulb moment of like, dude, you're 4 hours from this place you've always dreamed about being. Like, you got to go for it. And so I actually did a video contest for this the city we're looking for a social media ambassador, and it was arguably the first film I'd made, and I didn't win the contest or anything, but what it really did, it really reignited the creative spark in me to the point where I could no longer sleep at night because I'm like, I have to be creative. I have to do this thing. Because the thing was, I was driving this concrete truck sometimes for 13 hours a day, and there was so much driving. And when you're driving, and this was before even smartphones, right? But there was so much driving, and my mind would just be racing with thoughts and ideas. But I was so frustrated because I couldn't do anything. I was just driving this truck, and I didn't have an outlet. And so I discovered the outlet, and I feel like I got back to my roots, and I feel like I got back to doing what I was always meant to do. And then I started incrementally getting little bits of success. And that's not to say that I still don't have imposter syndrome. I ran into a fellow creative last night, and she's married to a tech entrepreneur. And we were saying, yeah, but as a creative, you wake up and you're in the middle of the night and you're just riddled with imposter and syndrome and doubts, and you don't know what you're going to do, and you sort of figure it out. And like, every creative's the same that I've met, but it's never too late. Getting back to the point of the original question, if you're 15, 50, 85, it's never too late. And I think, technology's really helped us in this regard. You can have a podcast, you can write a book, you can, do a website, you can do a YouTube channel, whatever it is, go for it. And so at the end of the day, the worst thing that can happen is you fail, and so what? You just do it again, and you only live once, right? So you
Absolutely.
may as well chase your dreams. And just to finish that, I think people always think about like, okay, what's my plan B? And I feel like I did my plan B first, in that the construction industry time in my life was almost the plan B, but I did it first. And because it made me so miserable, it terrifies me. I never want to go back to plan B. So now doing, or that was plan A, I guess, but now I'm doing the bit that doesn't make me miserable. And so there you go.
Look at that. And the bit that you're doing right now, not only does it find you being an award winner, but more importantly, I notice there's a trend here. You almost exclusively do documentary work. So I have a question relative to that. It's been said by other creators who do documentaries that literally what you were doing is shooting a story that some are familiar with, but picking out the parts that are unseen. Would you say that that's why you do documentary work, or what draws you to it?
It's funny, and I know a lot of documentarians, and we all say the same thing. We're all desperate to get into narrative.
Ah,
And I have done a couple of narrative projects. I shot a narrative project last summer with some incredible people that are, you know, definitely a level above me in Hollywood, as it were. And so that was a really cool experience. And I want to do more narrative. What I think about documentary is though, I'm that guy, and this is also partly a journalism a little bit, and also, considering living in the US as an outsider in many ways, I just see life, right? And I love life. Like I'm that guy, I could happily sit at a coffee shop and just watch the world go by for a couple of hours, right? And you see these little moments, right? And it could be like, the people that come and look for the plastic bottles in the trash cans, right? And I often think, well, what is their life like, right? What's going on in their world, or the lady sat in the car with the kids or whatever it is, someone just walking. Like I think to myself, where have they come from? Where are they going to? What are they doing? What's going on in their life? It's this almost addiction to the humanity of us all, right? And I just love storytelling in that regard. And so documentary affords you the opportunity to tell stories about people, and especially those like you touched on earlier that uh are unseen, right?
yeah.
And but at the same time, that's also what narrative does. It's just in a different way, and they're very, very different disciplines. And whilst I really enjoy documentary, I want to do more narrative, but then I keep getting pulled back to documentary. And so, I'm always torn. Right now I'm really lucky that I can do both a little bit. And so I don't really have to make that decision of like I'm only going to do one or the other. And think about a lot of the like A-list directors, a lot of them have done documentary, and they've come back to it, whether it's Ron Howard, Spielberg, what have you, Tom Hanks, they'll often do a documentary as well because there's something about it. It's a bit more visceral in some ways. It's a bit more real. And so I think they're really good complement to each other in many ways. And, I hope to continue doing both.
You bet. Speaking of stories, all right, let's talk about the film that you have in the Santa Barbara Film Festival. It's called Keep the Funk. It's officially 9 whole minutes long, and its release actually was February 6th. So I wanted to first off start by asking, there's a number of different community participants in this movie. Did they come to the actual screening of the film?
Second screening is tonight when a lot
Okay.
of them are coming. The first screening was yesterday
Yep.
during the work day. And so a
Ah,
lot of them couldn't make it. And that's another key thing in a lot of my films. I'm from a working class background. And so that's really important to me that arts and culture are accessible for everyone. And so
yeah.
there's a screening tonight that a lot of people are coming to, and a lot of subjects in the film who couldn't make it last night.
Very nice. To those of you that haven't seen it yet, it literally is the story of a Santa Barbara arts community, literally called Keep the Funk. And it's beautiful. It's all sorts of artisans and creatives. And what's nice about it is that the locals embrace it so much and continue to embrace it. It hasn't died out. The momentum hasn't gone away, which I think is thrilling. So, when you envisioned this, was it more important to you to stay with the locals, or was it more important for you because there's a number of scenes where we watch the community fighting against the city and this new proposed hotel that they're doing? Which mattered more to you as far as what was the poignancy here? What was the major point?
Absolutely the locals. And, in many ways, and we touched on it off camera, I made another film that's very similar to this about a pub that was under threat of demolition. And that was all about the locals. I mean, that film's actually called Locals Only.
Yep,
And I think that in a community like Santa Barbara, from those looking from the outside in, Santa Barbara is the place where Kevin Costner lives and Oprah lives and Harry and Meghan live here now. And it's a very bougie, like very wealthy area and what have you. And that's great. And we love all that. And it's a beautiful place. But there's also ordinary people that are just trying to make a living and get along. And
yep,
the irony is, a lot of the, hardworking individuals that live in this town and this area, there are pockets of where they congregate and places they go that are really meaningful to them as places to hang out and break bread with in many ways, right? Um,
Mhm.
and for the last few years, it has felt like there is this constant gentrification happening of this big money coming in, trying to make these new developments for all the tourists that are coming in at the peril of the locals where all these places and people are being displaced. And so it was really critical to focus on the locals and what this area means. And the irony with the film, I actually know a developer on a separate project, and we had coffee a few months ago. And I said to him, I was like, "You guys keep missing it. You keep missing the whole point of all this stuff is in all you've got to do is invite the community to one of the local breweries, buy everyone pizza and a beer, and just listen to them. But they seem to have this, it's almost this sense of entitlement of like, well, we have $100 million project and we're going to steamroll you through. And is it any wonder then that people rise up and push back against them? It's all about communication and community at the end of the day. If they just worked with everyone a little bit, they'd probably still be able to get a project, but it'd be a project that people in the community are probably a bit happier with. But I mean, this is a whole thing, not to go off topic about America, right? And it's just
Hmm.
this greed and what have you. But the local aspect was very important. And I wanted to, because that's the thing, right? As a filmmaker, I want to make sure that when locals see the film, that they're not pissed off at me as a filmmaker. And so I want to make sure that I feel like I'm conveying their story and their fears and their hopes and dreams and whatever is going in their life so that they can appreciate the film in that way.
What's nice too is that you give a good overall look at some of the community enjoying the various elements that are offered to them. And you also don't shy away from some of the committee hearing where you're listening to how money is going to be taken out of this community. You learn about the contamination that's going on there. And all I'm thinking to myself is that these God, awfully wonderful people are trying to preserve a community. And it really is all about, yes, to some degree, the money is sitting right there and they think that it's going to improve things so much, but they're forgetting about what made the community so unique is this entire area that they've built. Um, so I think you have a nice, wonderful balance of doing both. There's a mission on here, and this is what we're trying to achieve, but you also give a good glimpse into the community and you show a real family of artisans, which I think is lovely. I have to ask about the musical score, the very beginning and of course the very end song. Where did you find those? Because they're so quirky and fun and cool.
Yeah, so the most of the score throughout the film is all props to our editor. And as a tip for any aspiring filmmaker, find your editor because they are
Oh,
the editors are key to everything. So she picked a lot of that. To keep the funk, I was just Googling around one day and found this song called Keep the Funk. And I was like, this fits perfectly, and it's exactly what we need. And so that's what it's a single from, I don't know, back in the 80s or something. And
yeah.
it just fit perfectly and it worked. And yeah, it was purely by accident. Yeah.
Oh, you betcha. Now, without giving away too much, although it's kind of hard to talk about all this and not give it away, my question to you is I realize, of course, that they made an appeal. The appeal was denied. They're still trying to be hopeful. But I am concerned, with things like contamination and the fact that it sounds like a slam dunk that they've convinced this committee that the hotel should go in. Is there any other thing they can do? Like, how many more appeals can they do? I know they're taking it to another place now.
Yeah. So, and this is relatively recent in the last few weeks. There's two parts to this. They immediately filed an appeal to Coastal Commission. So that's the next big
Yeah,
body that the project will go to. And by filing the appeal, it delays everything. And one of the things we learned, not just in during this film, but other films, the thing that developers hate most is delays because it costs them money. And
yeah,
so we want to hurt them. We want them to cost money because they're not willing to communicate and talk and
sure.
give a little bit. So we're going to hurt you as best we can in your pocketbook, right? And so that got filed with Coastal Commission. So I think that comes up in March, that thing. Now,
Okay.
city council, one of the city council members, one of his rationale for denying the appeal and letting the project proceed was because he was worried that if they if they don't let it go through, that the developers would sue the city, and they didn't want to get into, a big lawsuit and what have you, what have you. So the legal team representing Keep the Funk have now filed a suit against the city also. So they were so worried about getting sued. Well, they've been sued now by the Keep the Funk people, and the suit is based purely on the environmental concerns. And this is where there was an opportunity to stop with the project, because this project, and I don't want us to get too deep in the weeds about this, but this project is being allowed to circumnavigate a lot of environmental regulations because of a 15-year-old report, basically. And everyone's like, maybe 15 years is a long time, and maybe we should look at things again. And so
Yeah,
that's why they filed suit. And so we will see what happens. So there is still hope. The change will come in the project.
you betcha. And are you thinking that, do you think this film might actually have some kind of an impact in terms of the overall appeal, et cetera? Is that possible?
Absolutely. And that was one of the reasons why we did it, because I think that, judging by the screening that we had yesterday, which was filled with a lot of locals, people were pissed off, and so and I know that the newspaper is going to do a bit more reporting on it. And I know some of the city council members, and I told them, I said, I have purposefully made this film make you look bad, you know? And I said, because at the end of the day, they just keep rolling over after hotel project after hotel project. At some point, there's going to be a breaking point. And so part of my goal with this film was to, like, hopefully make some of city council and others go, well, okay, well, maybe we're getting a lot of bad press here, so maybe we should, like, have a
Yeah.
pause and have a think or whatever. And that's the beauty of filmmaking in the media, right? And we should absolutely push back against power sometimes a little bit,
Yep.
and this is one way to do it. So absolutely, the film is part of the whole thing now and the whole process.
Very, very nice. Wonderful. Now, I don't want to forget to ask. I know we don't know 100% where Keep the Funk is going to be playing next, but as you just heard him, this interview won't air in time, but hopefully you guys get a chance to support him some point down in the road with this film. I also don't want to forget to ask. I saw your film is in post-production, Raft of Stars. Do we have an update on that?
We do not. That's a narrative film that I shot last summer that I produced.
Okay.
That's with the some Hollywood folk, and so we're trying to get the funding to make the feature length of that. It's based on a best-selling novel, so yeah, we'll see.
I gotcha. And I, of course, have to ask for my last question. Now, I just know that you're going to do a film about sailing, right? Because you live and breathe sailing. I'm like, what's with this guy not doing a production on sailing?
I did one. My first film was about
What was,
sailing.
okay, I get that, but like a more in depth, more narrative, more, I guess I'm just looking for a little more. Maybe it's me. It's
No,
your love,
totally.
not mine, but I'm like, what's the guy doing here?
No, you're absolutely right, though. So, Fresh to Frightening, my first film, which was
Yep.
about a yacht racing photographer, I have a feature-length version of that I want to do this
Mm-hmm.
summer. I've got to try and find the money about this famous yacht race. And then, in addition, I have this idea in my head of a narrative feature-length movie about the yacht racing photographer Sharon. I just need to sit down and write it and then get going on that, because there's very few good sailing movies ever made, and us sailors in the sailing community, we are always hyper critical of sailing movies, because we all sit there going, that's not how it goes, that's not how it works. And so my mission, one of my goals in life, is to make a sailing movie that sailors will enjoy, that they'll be like, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about.
That's what I'm talking about. Thank you very much on that. Now, I'm going to read off the 75 places that you can find Gareth, because that's pretty much how I've written down every single one. So his name is Gareth Kelly, and that's Garethkelly. So here we go: IMDb, LinkedIn, Film Freeway, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, two different websites, which is Bowline Films, excuse me, BOWlinefilms.com, and of course, keepthefunk.org. Did I miss anything?
Yeah, FreshToFrightening.com.
Oh, yeah. There you go. I knew it. There's like 70 of them, and he's got to add one more, right? The one thing that you should remember most recently is keep the funk. So, what I want to say to you, young man, is thank you so much for taking a very important concept, shining a very large spotlight on it, and continuing to say, hey, we as a community need to do something about that. That is super important for the preservation of artists and creativity, but more important for our community. So, thank you so much for the work you do.
Yeah, no problem. And thank you for having me, Cindy. I always love talking to people about my films. And if it inspires one person watching to go and chase their dreams, then that's all the better.
Thank you.